So in today's video, I want to talk to you guys about fishing line, because fishing line is probably the most important part of our entire setup that we have. You may have the best rod, reel, and bait, but if you don't have fishing line, then you ain't going to be able to go fishing or catch fish at all. And so in today's video, I want to talk to you guys about fishing line, but more specifically line diameter and what it means to you as a bass angler, because this is something that I think so many people overlook, is what line diameter they're fishing certain lures on and why they're doing it, because each line diameter has a specific job that it does really, really well and will help you to put more fish into the boat. Now, let's start with line diameter itself. What exactly does that mean for all you new anglers? Line diameter, put simply, is the size of your fishing line. And so it's literally like the thickness of your fishing line. So an 8-pound line diameter is going to be a lot smaller than a 20-pound line diameter. And then we also mentioned there poundage. That's oftentimes how we as bass anglers are going to refer to certain sizes of fishing line. You know, we're not going to say that's a 0.60 line diameter. No, we'll usually say that, hey, that's like a 6-pound fluorocarbon or a 10-pound fluorocarbon or a 20-pound fluorocarbon or mono or whatever it is. And so when you walk into the tackle store, just understand that the smaller the poundage, so like a 6-pound, is going to have a lot smaller line size than, say, a 20-pound will. Now, what all does this encompass when we're talking about fishing line and line diameter? Well, there's a few factors that line diameter is going to influence. Number one is going to be the visibility in the water. Obviously, a smaller line is going to have a lot less visibility in the water than a thicker line. Now, most of us bass anglers are using fluorocarbons, and most of these fluorocarbons are nearly invisible in the water because of the materials that they're made up of. But regardless, I've seen situations in super clear water where a 10, 15, 20-pound fluorocarbon will spook fish when a 6 or an 8-pound fluorocarbon won't. And for the most part, that's going to be a very finessey situation where you're not going to need that bigger, heavier line anyway. And so you can get away with throwing those smaller line diameters, but it's just something to keep in mind, that if the water's dirty, oftentimes the line diameter really isn't going to matter, especially like when you're pitching, flipping, you know, throwing a chatterbait or a spinnerbait or something like that. You can even beef up your fluorocarbon just so you have that little extra assurance that you got the strength and durability that you need to get those fish out of there. That's another thing to consider. Line diameter is going to affect the strength and durability of your fishing line. So obviously a smaller diameter line, a smaller poundage line, is going to have a lot less strength and durability than a bigger fluorocarbon or bigger diameter line will. Now, that being said, a lot of people get really wary about the poundage of fishing line. So say it's like a 6-pound line versus a 20-pound line. A lot of people think that 6-pound fishing line means that it's like a 6-pound fish will break 6-pound fishing line. That's not how that works. The poundage rating is from a direct pull, the direct, 6 pounds of pressure applied directly to that line. And there's a big difference between 6 pounds of direct pressure and a 6-pound fish. Oftentimes a bass, 6, 7, 8, even 10, 12 pounds, isn't able to exert 6 pounds of straight pressure. It's just impossible for them. They don't have the strength to be able to do that. So what that poundage actually means is just that. It's like how much pressure can you put directly on that fishing line before it breaks. And so there's a lot of people who's caught really big fish on 6-pound fluorocarbon, just like they have 20 and 25-pound fluorocarbon. Really, when you're talking about like the difference there, you're talking about the strength and durability of being able to set the hook on a fish and get them out of cover. So like if I'm flipping with 10-pound fluorocarbon, I'm probably going to break off a lot of fish. And that's just because I'm trying to bring those fish out of bushes and over man-made things and through a bunch of hard cover that's going to put little micro nicks and micro tears in that fluorocarbon. And that 10-pound fluorocarbon is going to start to lose strength and durability over time and not have the strength and durability to get that fish out of there. Whereas say a 20 or 25-pound fluorocarbon, it will get those little micro nicks and tears, but you might take 2-3 pounds off of its breaking strength, but you still have 20-pound fluorocarbon that you're able to get those fish out of there and get them into the boat. And so when you walk into the tackle store, don't think that a 6-pound line can only catch a 6-pound fish. That's the amount of pressure that you can put on that line before it breaks. Another thing that you got to consider is lure action and diving depth. Smaller fluorocarbons and smaller fishing lines are going to allow lures to dive deeper and have more action. The reason for that is they have a lot less resistance in the water, a lot less drag, and so it allows build lures like jerk baits and crankbaits and things like that to dive down to their maximum diving depth. Then once they reach that diving depth, to have all the action that they need to put fish into the boat. And so oftentimes when I'm fishing things like crankbaits and jerkbaits, I won't use more than a 10-pound fluorocarbon just so I can get the maximum diving depth out of that bait, make sure it's diving to where it needs to be diving to, and I'm able to then get fish to bite out of the depth in which they're living. And so keep that in mind. Now that being said, it doesn't mean you can't fish a build lure on heavier fluorocarbon. It just means you're not going to get the maximum diving depth out of a bait, and sometimes that's a good thing. You know, like when I'm fishing square bills in the spring and I'm just grinding them up in like 1 foot to 3 foot of water, I'm not really concerned with that square bill getting as deep as it needs to get. What I'm more concerned about is having the strength and durability out of the fishing line to be able to just grind it through rocks and then put fish into the boat. And so I'll throw my square bills on like a 15 to 17 pound fluorocarbon. But yeah, that's just fishing line. That's what line diameter means. That's what line diameter does to us as bass anglers and what it means to us as bass anglers. I think this is an overlooked topic that needed to be addressed. And if you want to see me cracking some fish with some really heavy fishing line, click this video. It's popping up right here.